It looks like we're about ready to start up, and nothing is wrong and nothing is broken, and I definitely didn't spend 20 minutes trying to fix a camera that didn't work because tech issues. I don't have scuff. That has not happened 2 days in a row now. The joys of editing mean that I could make that claim, and nobody who wasn't here and has an accurate look at the chat on the side that I just remembered I am not disabling would be able to tell that. Okay, maybe I got caught on this one. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Airier. Today we're checking the next part of Star Wars Warhammer 40K, Episode 42, Mortal Fall, Part 2. I've been told explicitly for this episode that there is something fan did here that is considered a thirst problem. So, to equivalate? I cannot speak a word today. I'm not even sure what word I'm trying to say. Alleviate. That's the word. I has water. And, more importantly, I has bean juice. I'm not sure why that matters. I mean, I would need the bean juice regardless because coffee. But we're doing that. Also, I might know why I had some scuff today. Even though this is a 40K related stream, I might be cheating on it with Corvus Belli's Infinity. Yeah, I got the Observance pack. I don't know what that means. I just saw nuns with swords, and it's like, you know what? I'm down with this one. There's something I enjoy with having a bunch of nuns who have giant fuck-off guns, and that basically is all I care about at this point. I don't know anything about the game, so I'm cheating on 40K, and that's probably why things just got scuffed. Yeah. More importantly, we're going to jump right in and definitely start exactly on time. Because that's exactly how this works. I always start when I mean to. And what I mean to is whatever the system will let me. Oh, jeez. So, more importantly, I don't know what we're getting into on this one. But I did see Hecate was in the image, so she's involved somehow. Granted, I knew that was going to be the case because the previous episodes and parts had been leading up to that. Although that doesn't mean much because fan does have a habit of leading into a really cool scene and then just going off in some other direction completely. So, yeah. Also, Hobbit in the chat. One, thank you very much, man. I saw you made how much? Oh, geez, 5 gifted memberships too. God damn. Thank you, man. That was what summoned me. Unfortunately, what kept me down was scuff, which definitely didn't happen. Yeah. And he mentioned in the chat that I love some large guns. I do. Because honestly, they're really fun to paint and they're just really cool. It's like, hey, check it out. Small little person. Giant rifle. What can I say? Chicks dig rifles. No, talking about scuff. I even didn't do the freaking quote from Helsing Abridged right. My wife would never forgive me for that one. Because she's actually just as much a fan of that as I am. Yeah. More importantly, we're going to jump right in. This is 42, Mortal Fall Part 2. And also, I had to crack the door because it's a sauna in here right now. So if I have to randomly stop the stream because a cat is chewing on the power cord again, you'll probably hear me scream like a girl, no, don't do that! Again, because that has happened. Yeah. Suicidal kitties. Why? Okay, we're going back to the funk intro. I do like it, but it seems more muted than last time.
The fires glittered like living jewels, each one a small scion of light born of the stars. The strafing shots of blaster and last bolts dazzled her eyes like spikes of chem-induced ecstasy. Every fierce flare and luminescent shower hearkening to the great, dark purpose she had been shaped to fulfill.
Dark purpose?
All the movement, the noise, like a never-ending festival of constant action, and the price of admission was no more or less than life. Yours or someone else's.
Probably the Imperium
The battlefield
side.
below the petite killer was a scattering of subconscious and interconscious beauty which could not but stutter her breath in her chest. The broken assassin rocked gently on...
Okay, that's probably Hecate. We're just jumping right into her then. Okay. Also, this is weird. I was assuming it was a battle sister being more meditative because I don't think there's any assassins that are this, well, mentally healthy to have these thoughts whatsoever. I mean, Evisor, thinking would be a big thing. Calexis, I actually have no idea about their inner mentality. They're just literally piles of, oh god, what the fuck are you? Run away screaming, or just fall over dead if you're a psyker. I mean, it's entirely possible the Vindicare could have these types of thoughts, but I don't think Hecate was one of those. Unless there is a Vindicare as well. Technically one of the... Oh, I forgot the name of the one that... not polymorphs, but has that suit that lets them shapeshift. Shapeshift, that's the word. I guess they could if they have more downtime. Maybe she's one of those.
On her heels, perched on the very ledge of one of the spires, ignoring the languid chatter which came from behind her, where stood her master's 2 other companions, each so far back in the priority of her attention that they may as well have been invisible spirits. Before her, after a steep drop, was an overlook they had found to wait for Master Weiler and his orders, and from here she could see nearly the entire basilica battle as
Master Weiler. Oh. Oh, now that is... I want to hear that again, just to make sure I'm hearing that right. So she doesn't just work for one. For her companions. So even though she's with Samael, she works for Weiler. Oh, I thought there might be some internal tension between Inquisitors because that's a kind of a trope at this point in 40K, but apparently no.
And from here, she could see nearly the entire basilica battle as it played out.
Morphine, it's a drug, okay.
So many colors, so many different kinds of heat, explosions, and struggle. So many varied flavors of death. The sky itself was slowly dying red as the smoke from the battle grew higher and higher, obscuring the sun and leaving only one color of light to slip by. Crouched, her toes hanging slightly over the edge, her enhanced eyes ached dully in her skull as she watched on with unblinking, predatory readiness. The bright blue spheres vibrating eagerly in her sockets, hopping between the myriad details within her sight in rapid succession.
I know fan means that the eyes were hopping between viewpoints, but that's just one of those weird, disturbing moments where technically the action is being put on not where the eye is looking, but the eye's motion itself, so it sounds like they're actually jumping out of the head. I know what he's implying, it makes sense, but this is just one of those weird English things where technically with how that sentence is structured, she just ripped her eyes out, and because they were vibrating before, indicating that they're moving within her head, that would then indicate that they're out of the head, jumping from site to site, which, I mean, it's entirely possible this is body horror, and that actually is exactly what's happening. I'm going to ignore that and pretend this is just fan using slightly confusing language. It really doesn't matter, and would just be fixed by a few tense changes, if nothing else.
Her cheeks bulged, each one containing a half-depleted jawbreaker which she noisily rolled around with her tongue. The circular...
They still have jawbreakers? Sorry, that's stupid, but it's like finding out Hershey is still around in 40K. Sure, why not? They're evil enough. I mean, nothing like the Chica bananas, but that's a different thing.
Lumps of sugar being worn down by her constant slurping and sucking. The dormant weapon savored the constant drip of sugar she got from the 2 hard candies.
Fan?
Being worn down by her constant slurping and sucking. The dormant weapon savored the constant drip of sugar she got from the 2 hard candies.
You know what you did. Why?
Letting their stimulating flavor flow from her mouth and up to her brain, triggering small surges of adrenaline and endorphins, associated as it was with the heaviest of her combat stims. Hecate shuddered, muscles twitching, augmentations temporarily rousing, as she allowed the memories those devastating chemicals had branded into her very blood soothe over the assassin's twisted, uneasily slumbering mind.
Wait, slumbering mind? Is she sleepwalking? I mean, I guess that would be one way to do it. Still, though, I mean, as far as assassins go, I thought the only ones who really abused chemicals were the ones doing polymorphine, which for some reason I still can't remember. And Hobbit just said go to bonk on this one. I have no idea what you're talking about. The Evisor. But, I mean, Evisor are literally physically and chemically restrained. They don't even have the wherewithal to move around like this. On the other hand, if she had some cybernetic basically puppeting her right now, I guess that would make sense. But also, that would literally be the biggest affront to the Mechanicus possible. A human mind subservient in any way, shape, or form to a machine. So, yeah, I don't think that would be the thing.
Her need to do as she had been trained to struggled against the mental safeties of her first face. Her second and third held down in nets of sleep, mimetically cast.
Multiple faces, calling her Hecate, which was a three-faced god. Okay, fan, I see what you did there, and that is actually really neat. I thought you were just choosing the name because it sounded cool, but no, you're actually making that part of her characterization. And if there's slubbering personalities, then there's at least two other activations. Wow. She's just a flat-out anime protagonist, isn't she?
And conjured within the walls of her thoughts. But, at least for the moment, the nets were strong, and her thin first face grinned manically down at the sprawling scene before her eyes. Lights, movement, sweetness, fun, all things which pleased and strengthened the first face of Hecate. The face her master chose to keep around the most often. The young woman had gone entire missions in this face, gleefully tailing his serious business, enjoying the novelty and opportunity to see new things, taste new sweets, and sometimes, very rarely, do some killing. As her first face
Rarely do killing. Oh, that just sounds weird. I mean, I know she's an assassin. I was assuming we are going to get to the fucked up stuff eventually, but maybe just the other faces get to do all the killing, because it seems like the normal first, less murderous face is still perfectly capable of it, which, you know, makes sense. Honestly, the fact that they have a face that isn't immediately psychopathic is still weird for the Imperium, but okay. This is a much different character than I would normally expect to see.
Face she very scarcely was allowed to kill. That face was her safe face, the mind she turned to leisure, allowing most of her meticulously scavenged brain to sleep, fitfully writhing behind her shimmering blue eyes. Hecate delighted in her first face, but most, if not all, of the time she spent in that face felt like a dream. Fun, meaningless, light as air, and heavy as thick blanket sheets. She didn't mind it when she could remain in this face, where time moved fast and slow, where laws were mixed and mingled, made smooth and easy, and where her past and future were an equal blur. But there was a sharpness she lost in it, a reduction of who and what she was. Did the gun enjoy resting in the holster? Does the blade not mind modestly hiding in its sheath?
I mean, considering it's 40K and spirits are a thing, that's actually entirely a possibility, so I don't think it's what fans going for, but it's entirely possible what she's pining on is literally a thing.
Perhaps, but only when given the promise of future service, of the ability to one day come alive once more and be of use. She hated her waking self, her second and third faces both. But it galled her dreaming self to dance through entire missions, months and months, without truly opening her eyes even a single time.
Damn.
But
and
suddenly, Hecate saw that this mission would not be like most of the others. Her muscles tensed and...
So wait, no, I wasn't misreading it. Apparently, she is an assassin that doesn't actually kill that much. Because she said most of her missions would actually involve her just dancing through in here and only occasionally killing. That's, I hate to say that they're misusing an assassin, but isn't that literally not how they're supposed to be used? Or is she just really good as intimidation behind the scenes or something?
Stilled,
I was misunderstanding
automatic
it, though.
process beginning within her mind, like dominoes of colossal size, slowly swaying and falling into one another, one at a time. It was not the rush of Republic soldiers moving in towards the fight, or the swarms of rebels overcoming the walls, or even the arrival of their battleships in the air above them, which triggered this awareness within her and began the change.
So she can
After
trigger
all,
it herself?
Such things were above the considerations of this face of hers.
The light that
no,
shot up, yeah.
What alerted her and triggered the conversion that was occurring even then within her was the bright red flare she suddenly spotted arching into the air above the fight. Crimson in a very specific way and pulsing in a very peculiar pattern, the signal was unmistakable to her.
Oh, so it's not even just the light itself, it's the actual pulse of the flare. Oh, that's actually kind of brilliant because it's a signal on two different levels. One, it's an obvious signal flare if you need basic allies. And two, if you need very specific allies and you know they're going to see it, they're also there. Huh. That's actually really neat. But also because the basic allies would never know about the secondary allies because that's just too simplistic to see, but she could see it. That's actually a really cool detail fan put in. I'm actually really glad he did that.
Her segmented mind, and at the sight, a million eyes within her began to creak open. She felt cobwebs falling away, a new awareness unfurling itself within her, and she felt her mouth begin to water behind her straight white teeth. Her blue eyes became wide, and then even wider and wider still. The distant beacon flickered in her vision, calling to something hidden, signaling the depths of memory and action which had been sleeping beneath a mimetic veil. That veil now parted and dissolved in a vortex of mental components which all streamed into place as rehearsed. Vivid recollections of running across a bleak surface came into focus.
Fan, I know you like to use a lot of 3D art from AI, and while the main character looks fine, the background is absolute nightmare fuel, man. It looks like people's heads are blowing sideways. This person's shoulder is deciding to mutate into an elbow and a chin with a helmet that is flesh, and what the hell, man?
Of worn striking mats, and hours spent pushing her fists into them. Machine faces with barely scraps of flesh left on them lifted her arms and legs, measured her, asked her questions. Push and push and push. Always pushing her, then restraining her, exploding who and what she had been, and then collecting the pieces and building her anew.
Maybe
this
literally.
arm was not her arm. It was his weapon. This leg was not her leg. It was his weapon.
See, normally I would think, okay, she's talking about being Samael's weapon, and that's who she's running to because of the shot, but earlier she said Master Weiler, so this is either, oh, cool, Samael has a good backup, or Weiler has a very dangerous monster on cue beyond the Daemon host. One of them I like better.
This life was not her life. It was his weapon. Her first face began to dry away and withdraw, like water caught on the surface of an ascending void craft, the bright red flashes of the flare unanchoring a hook within her and dragging out something far more substantial from deep, deep beneath the surface of her thoughts. Visions of change, of biting down into a medical bit as she hung, suspended above cruel metal hands, hands which opened her skin and operated on her body in the same manner as they may for a vehicle or complex gun.
Actually, they'd probably be more reverent with the complex companies. It's probably Mechanicus, so if anything, they're being less reverent.
She was imperfect. They needed to make her better. They needed to make her change so that she could fit comfortably into his hand. Segmented portions of Hecate's mind came awake in a rush, each carved away from her greater whole, specialized, generalized, and reintegrated. To a mind reader, her thoughts would prove cavernous, scattered, and united all at once, grasping at her will, being no better than grasping at a cascade of worms, only able to affect so many with only 2 hands. Her densely wrinkled gray matter came alive after weeks of dormancy. And with this awakening, augmentations buried deep within every inch of her body rumbled and stirred into activity. Recollections of hardening, of growing, of getting stronger, feeling faster, feeling better. Even in recovery, they forced her to walk, to bend slowly against her injuries, to become immune to pain, and then more than immune. Her knuckles hardened, her bones creaking within her as they grew thicker and thicker, the better to brace the improvements drilled into and through them.
This is going to sound weird, and this is actually something that I've been working as a base theory in regular 40K on top of fans' interpretation, but what they're describing sounds a lot like just being upgraded to a Space Marine, but done to a normal non-Space Marine person without the gene seed. I mean, I always did wonder if basic assassin conversion was the basis of Space Marines and the Thunder Warriors, so it seems like Fan is describing a process incredibly similar. I'm not sure if that's going to be more him just going with close to 40K lore, but it does sound very, very reminiscent of it.
Endoskeletal servos began to whine inside her flesh, waking with a burn that filled her muscles from neck to toes.
Yep.
Organic, implanted nodules which harvested her body's hormones and nutrients suddenly reversed their flows, no longer ambiently draining her to create their stock, but now dripping their storage of artificially synthesized combat and rejuvenation drugs directly into her blood.
Ooh, okay, that's actually a cool little adaptation. Also, technically, the body does have a system that does it already. It's called FAT. It's just, harder to get back out than to put in.
Fire filled her from head to toe, bringing with it images within her mind, images of tests, of successes, and of failure. She was bound to a chair, strips of cloth covering her eyes, like an animal which may panic at the first sight of the unfamiliar. An argument was being had, words she understood, but could barely hold in her mind. A thick, uncomfortable device, a collar of some kind, pushed her chin up slightly and pressed harsh barbs into her neck. The barbs were metal and alive, filling her with a gentle poison that made everything around her swim and slide in a narcotic haze. They had worked so hard on her to make her right, to make her fit.
That almost sounds like an Eversor more than anything else. Also, why is it that I remember the name of the Venenum cult, or order for the assassins, but I still cannot remember the one that used polymorphine? It's actually bugging me at this point.
But it was all for naught. Hecate bore the terrible taint within her, a demonic power which was not meant for her, for she was to be a tool of purity, uncorrupted, clean only when covered in blood. But now...
I'm sorry, what?
Meant for her, but it was all for naught. Hecate bore the terrible taint within her, a demonic power which was not meant for her, for she was to be a...
Normally, I would think this is about the drugs, because it sounds like she's an Eversor at this point, which is, I guess, why the mental conditioning is there. And frankly, this makes her the literal most stable Eversor I've ever heard described in any way, shape, or form. because in lore and tabletop, they're basically described as no. No, you'd have more luck trying to argue claiming your Horus with a flesh terror who may or may not be very raged at the moment, if you know what I mean. And if you don't, it probably wouldn't have any effect than arguing with an Eversor. God. And Weiler already has a thing for Daemon hosts, so maybe there's another one.
Tool of purity, uncorrupted,
That would also
clean
explain
only
the name,
when
because that's
covered in blood. But now she was a waste, impure, lost to the cause. The taint made her body frailer than was expected, and it
Frail.
compromised her connections to the One. The only thing left for her was liquidation and recycling of what could be taken back. But this was not a judgment she was hearing, though she had judged herself. It was
So she's an Eversor that seems like she was corrupted in somehow.
an argument, and against the points thus made, a powerful voice contended back against them. She would never be purely his weapon, the weapon of the god of mankind.
Oh, she was only talking about the Emperor. I thought she was actually just going full Weiler, which, I mean, more likely to kill a lot of people, but also still safer.
But she could become his weapon, the weapon of his voice, of his word, Weiler's weapon.
Never mind. My worst outcome is exactly what I thought it would be.
His tool for rendering the greater judgment. But she was too weak to finish the temple's course, to survive all of the augmentations. The voice
What was the
did
course?
not care. The master looked upon her flaws, and behind her blindness, she had felt his smile. I will finish what was started. I will make something useful from what you call a failure.
Wait. Wait. Oh. Weiler is a family name. Because that was not the Inquisitor A-class Weiler. That was Samael's Oh, they're... Okay. That explains things, and why it's the Weiler family. That also implied the third one was probably his Weiler as well.
In the name of my family,
Yeah!
I'll not let her go to waste. The Weiler had
Samael
said
Weiler.
then, years ago.
Fucking
Hecate
A,
breathed out a
fan.
breath of cold hoarfrost.
Fan, you literally just got in here under me thinking, oh, what the I don't, god damn it. Ah, you fucking, just son of a.
Lost, as the psychic eye which invisibly adorned her mind creaked open, making the air around her body wave as though subject to extreme
Brothers,
heat.
cousins,
And her true
descendants?
eyes, once blue as the sky, began to shift their color as the invisibly small silver tubes which lined her irises began to flood her augmented eye lenses with specialized crimson particles, designed to shield her from flashes and explosions, as well as extend her overlapping vision into the infrared spectrum. They dyed her vision and brought her true self to the fore. Hecate stood up straight on the ledge, red eyes wide, toes still hanging over the lip of an impossibly high drop. Her body vibrated with countless internal transformations, skin shivering and shaking before gradually settling into blade-like stillness. And all the while, the awakened assassin smoothly reached into her long, black trench coat with both arms, grasping to either side of her long, dark garment. Her right hand withdrew itself in a smooth flourish. A curved black knife clutched between each of her knuckles, each blade humming softly as...
Fan, what the fuck, man? I know you like AI art, but this is just... Ew.
Her edges caressed the air. The other hand drew forth no weapon, raising the object high into the air over her head as she whipped her right arm out to the side. Hecate turned her head and spat out the 2 half-finished motes of sugar she had been sucking on, letting them bounce off the rim of the drop and watching them fall before she faced forward again and carefully placed the object over the skin of her suddenly blank expression.
Wait, what?
Before she faced once half-finished motes, Hecate turned her head and spat out the 2 half-finished motes of sugar she had been sucking on, letting them bounce off the rim of the drop and watching them fall before she faced forward again and carefully placed the object over the skin of her suddenly blank expression.
Okay, maybe I'm just missing something obvious, but did she just, like, magic up a mask? What? I feel like I'm missing something obvious.
White mask, perfectly fitted to her face, fell over her features, caressing the skin of her expression and adhering with a hiss and a click. And with that, her third face was now turned.
Wait. Oh. I was actually going to ask what the third face and the second face were. I guess the second face is her being aware of herself without the mask, and the third face is full-on Eversur. Oh, and Fan just said he was in her trench coat? Oh. Oh, okay. I didn't quite get that's what you meant. So I guess the third face is an actual literal mask she puts on, too. Yeah. Also, admittedly, she is probably the most sane Eversur I've ever heard described in any way, shape, or form. And I would include the ones who technically were in charge and, you know, made decisions on the High Lords sections. You know, the ones who eventually went traitor and were killed around the War of the Beast time period.
Eyes blazing deeply crimson beneath the customized pale mask which proclaimed her imperial path. Her sister's face, her retraining, her home, and then her new home. Images of raw pain and emotion rocked over and against her open eyes, but she blinked them away with a practiced ease, converting that trauma into a pure, vibrant desire for violence. Without any further delay, Hecate crossed her arms, one empty, one holding a wicked blade between each finger, and twisted, turning and dropping down off of the ledge and into a certainly lethal drop.
Except
the nearly complete agent of the Eversur Temple twirled as she fell, turning and spinning rapidly, becoming a drill as the air whistled in her ears and blew back her long, blonde hair. The broken assassin felt no fear. In fact, she barely felt the thrill of her fall at all. It took much...
Wait, so she barely felt the thrill of her fall. So she did actually feel it, though. Again, I see why she dropped out. She's just way more human than expected.
More than that to stir the blood of the third face of Hecate unleashed. She spun down and suddenly plunged into a small legion of speeder bikes which blitzed through the air directly below her path.
She just jumped onto a flying bike.
She arrested her momentum 50 feet below the ground, catching a passing vehicle, moving with the momentum of her spinning fall to throw herself up and over one side of the bike. Hecate kicked one of the 2 clones who rode the speeder off with a long-legged strike.
I would love if there was some way to get a depiction of this in animation. Because just the idea of Hecate falling off and then grabbing a bike seems like the opening to one of the best adaptations of... Well, what was it called? It had... In 2000s era Ghost in the Shell. That's the one. It's the Ghost in the Shell intro where the Major's jumping off the building. It has that energy so hard, but then jumping in, grabbing the bike, swinging over, knocking the clone. This is so freaking cool. I would love to see this animated.
And used her knife-bearing hand to tear through the face and head of the other clone, who was actually at the controls.
God damn.
He fell away like a limp sack of dead porgs, and Hecate settled into the seat.
Really? Really, fan? A limp sack of dead porgs? Okay, 1, I did not need that image. 2, this is actually a writing gripe. I don't think she would know what a porg is, so maybe not the right choice of words to use from this character's perspective. Unless she was randomly obsessed with porgs because they're cute in her first face, which admittedly would be hilarious as a random moe point, because, you know, you've already given her all the sugar, why not? You know, the little murder drone, who literally is here for all the murder. It's like the littlest investor who could. Is obsessed with porgs and slaughtering them.
Her sin-skin suit squeaking as her hands slid over handles and triggers. The assassin felt a deep, mental clench, one eye twitching as a specialized part of her segmented brain asserted itself. Quickly comparing the controls she felt and saw to over 10,000 similar designs, which had been loaded into her mind, taken from both Imperial and Xenos sources. Her hands...
They were allowed to have Xenos source. Never mind, it's a Wyler. Doesn't even matter which one, it's an Inquisitor, of course they're allowed. If this was a standard level assassin, having access to Xenos information, and you're not specifically running some very heretical stuff, I don't think they would have let an Eversor have that normally. But again, she's working with Inquisitor, so that makes a lot more sense.
Flicked across the various buttons, dials, and throttles, causing the bike to stutter and drop out of the air like a downward thrown lance. Yet, less than a second later, she pulled the bike back up, flying between the hundreds of others which hovered about in all directions, grinning to herself as she amalgamated a control scheme for herself. Several clones took note of the hijacking.
But
the second clone mounted on each of the alerted bikes, aiming a blaster to try to shoot her down, and wasting little time in filling the air around them with the bright blue glare of their blaster bolts. Seeing this, eyes bouncing and darting inside her mask, Hecate drifted to the left and maintained her level and flight speed.
I know it's not supposed to be a random reference here, but she's pulling a maneuver. Because in The Empire Strikes Back, Han Solo evades a ship that's shooting him by pulling a maneuver, drifting to the left. It's not a reference, but it's apparently a very established thing in Star Wars that if you just drift a little to the left, you can avoid bullets. According to a fan, he said, Eversor are actually trained to handle all kinds of vehicles and weapons to accomplish their task. And yes, they have Eldar speeder bikes loaded into their heads so that they can do things just like this. Neat. I guess Eldar makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of other aliens that I'd be a lot more nervous about. Granted, that would also still be the Eldar now that I think about it. So, okay, yeah, it makes sense. And I guess, well, the Eversor, well, most temples are always slightly inquisitorial adjacent as it is, so it makes sense regardless.
Until they began to shoot. Swinging her legs to one side to ride side-saddled, while veering hard to the right and spinning the speeder bike in the air, Hecate revved its repulsor drive to maximum and sent herself flying across the air in a low arc. The trail of shots that chased her almost instantly veered into lethal crossfire, shooting 2 other bikes down before her arching spin terminated,
good art on this one.
Slamming into the side of another speeder bike in the process, both exploding as they collided. But while the 2 clones on the other bike perished during the sudden detonation, Hecate had already thrown herself up and off the bike by the time it crashed, using its shockwave to push her just a little further into the air, hooking another one of the bikes and swinging onto its back.
Dear God, someone tell me there's someone working on an animation for this. I mean, fans okay with AI art already. Why not just do like one of those generators with this text? This is so freaking, I mean, feed in Kubik's images, like, or ask Kubik if he knows how to do it, because Dear God, I want to see this animated so much. This is so freaking cool. Out of all the things, this is the most acrobatic thing I've heard Fan describe so far. And he's described a lot of really acrobatic fights.
She briefly scuffled with a surprised clone there, but tore his arms away with jagged swipes of her knife-bearing hand.
Oh yeah,
throwing him over the side as he screamed. Mask spattered in red, she leapt onto the back of the driver, breaking his neck and sliding him smoothly out of his seat before taking control. The bikes around her scattered, curving around to try to follow her and get behind her, but by now, they were coming close to the Imperial Wall. The devastated structure was pocked with holes and blasts,
they're at the basilica.
melted down almost halfway to its length by turbo laser blasts, and clearly already overrun. Eyes wide with building adrenaline, Hecate sped up as they came for her.
I forgot that they had orbital superiority at this point. On the other hand, they have orbital superiority, and they've only melted half of it. Granted, this isn't half of it in the term, or the time that the flare went up to her getting here, so I guess that makes a lot more sense. It's still impressive it could hold out this long, though. Turbo laser direct fire is not weak, especially if you don't have shields. And I don't think the Star Wars side is encountering any from the Imperium side, oddly enough. At least not on the ground. Also, Hobbit, which do you want animated, the scene or Murder Barbie Magos? Honestly, Hobbit, I'd actually probably take the scene with Hecate over Murder Barbie, just because that's cool, but this has way more just interaction on a 3D plane, so it'd be way more interesting to see. It'd be really awesome, though. Oh, God.
Crouching down and lowering her body's profile as she angled for one of the blast craters in the side of the fortification, cracking a jagged grin beneath her mask as she shrank down as much as she could against the silhouette of the speeder bike she now rode. This helped her to avoid the shots that soon came chasing after, blue bolts of plasmatic fury.
This is actually kind of fascinating to me, that the part that is enjoyable to her the most right now, like the murder, the falling is just the job, narrowly avoiding death by being shot and clinging to a speeder bike as it's careening into a under fire fortress. And that's the part where she cracks a smile. Oh my God, she's an adrenaline junkie. I mean, to be fair, there's a lot of adrenaline junkies who are also sugar addicts, so it kind of does make sense. I don't think Fan even intended that, but it does kind of work out that way.
Scorching the air around her as the clones behind her opened fire. But that was not an issue for the Imperial assassin, who knew a good trick to buy herself the time she would need to reach the wall.
Fade to the left.
Hecate spun her speeder to avoid their tracking, dervishing it long ways this time while keeping her on course. The twirling bike managed to confuse the rear fire long enough to enable her to lance into the hole she had been aiming for, clearing it completely.
She just drove through the wall.
Or at least clearing the first hole completely.
What?
But while the weapon that had blasted the wall here had indeed managed to penetrate the other side, the hole there was much smaller, too small to allow a speeder bike through.
But not an episode.
In the fraction of a second she had after coming through the first breach, she angled her bike down, eyes vibrating in her skull, grin now a death-seeking smirk which covered her hidden face, tense and ready. She leapt off the bike as it veered down, bringing her arms and legs in tightly, still spinning with the momentum of her bike, and clearing the second hole only by the skin of her teeth, the speeder slamming violently into the wall beneath her. Again, she was falling, this time twirling all the way down to the ground, converting her sideways spin into a frontward one. Her arms and legs curled in as she hit the metal floor, spinning, moving like a wheel, rolling with her momentum before springing open in a way which would have seemed natural to a droideka, knives splayed in her hand. All around her were rebels and clones, most of them too busy.
Honestly, I'm a little surprised Fan didn't use the time right here. All around her were dead men who didn't know it yet. That sounds exactly like the exact right description too, but it's that little boast that is perfectly fitting for someone who can do all this shit.
Already fighting with the Imperial guardsmen they were surrounding, or with charging towards the basilica to notice her. A fatal mistake on their part, and one most never realized as Hecate slid to a standing position, clenched her curved knives tightly, and began to deal death. Her booted feet pumped, artificial muscle strands straining against reinforced bones as she accelerated herself to an utterly inhuman speed. As she did, the assassin lashed out, left and right, knives cutting the air alongside her swift feet, spinning in the midst of battle, each blade juggled from one hand to the next. Fully caught in her cavorting dance of death, Hecate began opening throats and twisting blasters out of clenched fists.
Somehow, Fan is describing her moving more fluid than the Jedi when they fight, or even the few times he's shown, well, Dooku fighting. Granted, Dooku we didn't really see fighting, we just saw the outcome of his fight, so it kind of makes sense. But this is probably the quickest description of someone dancing around the enemy and just tearing them apart at speed, which, admittedly, for an Eviscer is exactly what they do, but usually with less precision and more over-the-top, blatantly visible violence. I mean, the point of an Eviscer assassin isn't to kill someone, it's to make everyone else aware they're going to kill someone. And everyone around them. It's not so much a, we need this person dead. It's, we need this person dead in the most brutal method possible and everyone around them for good measure. An Eviscer is not a quiet act. It is a statement. Like a bomb, except with somehow less collateral damage to the infrastructure.
Breaking them open along their centers like long metallic eggs.
God damn.
Some of these blasters had glowing cylindrical containers called Tabana gas housings, which would come free after the blaster was broken open in a particular way. Sometimes these canisters had cracks or damage on them from the maneuver. These Hecate left behind to explode in her wake, blowing bloody holes in the lines of the Republic soldiers.
Fan, did you really just describe her walking away from explosions? I mean, you already gave her the coolest intro of every damn character in this entire freaking franchise that you've written up so far, but you're actually just going full-on meme status of walking away from an explosion? I mean, admittedly, she's probably running away, but still, you're literally saying she's leaving explosions in her wake. It's even warranted. It doesn't even feel like it's off-putting, but you actually did it, you son of a... It's so cheesy and you're pulling it off. I can't tell if I'm cringing or jealous. Both. Let's go with both on this one.
Before they even had time to realize what was among them. But some of these containers were whole and unbroken, and these she snatched out of the air, collecting them in her left hand and juggling them between her fingers until she had 5. And as soon as she had collected all the glowing blue vials she would need, the dancing killer came to where she was going, and where she would need to put these glowing blue tubes of explosive gas to use.
Yep.
Before her, being steadily surrounded by Republic troops, but currently dueling 2 Jedi Masters, was her own master, Samael Weiler. He was on the ground, on his back, staving off a purple blade of light with his...
Now here's the biggest question. How does Obi-Wan survive this? I'm assuming Mace Windu does, because Fan seems to be building him up into an antagonist. Mostly because I also remember his earlier statements about how his interpretation of Mace Windu is he's already fallen and just hasn't realized it yet. And I don't think he'd kill Obi-Wan off in such a display right now, because literal plot armor from the Force. Every other clone here is going to die, and I think someone probably will lose a limb. But this is going to be interesting.
Flickering, flashing white saber.
How do you
he
pull this off
appeared to be mere moments from being overwhelmed and killed. A thought which instantly soured all of the flavor in the assassin's mouth. In response to that...
And proving that this is probably the most mentally sane Eviscer, failed or otherwise, that I've ever heard of, caring about someone else. I mean, yeah, it's all based on her literal indoctrination to be his tool, but still... She's gone full, for her, Eviscer, and still has enough information to realize that the person she's trying to protect, and isn't that a weird sentence to say, is in trouble. God damn. This is probably the coolest interpretation of an ever story I've ever seen, and I think I actually prefer it to the standard ones.
Sight. The third face of Hecate released a scream taken and amplified by the technology in her mask, which shielded her ears from the following sonic blast.
Oh,
the
an actual sonic
hateful
attack.
killer cartwheeled towards the assailants, converting her breakneck forward speed into upward force as she leapt into the air, her arms crossed over her chest. At the apex of her leap, she uncrossed her arms, running her blades over the vials, slashing them just as she let them fly. Having thrown them like glowing shuriken knives into the gathering forces around her master, Hecate landed as a ring of colorful explosions surrounded the three combatants.
And she has already used the best way to deal with a Jedi. High explosives. Hell, it even worked in some of the old Star Wars games where the Jedi were invulnerable. Invulnerable, that's the word. And yes, I will admit, I loved using explosives to kill invulnerable enemies.
The assassin dropping right in amongst them. She had planned to plant her feet in the face of the man assailing her master, a bald Jedi with an amethyst blade.
Yeah?
But he seemed to sense her coming. Lifting his forearm and turning, he absorbed her twin kicks into his block, his blade still pressing down against her master's weapon. But in that moment, when he was forced to redirect his attention to Hecate, Mace Windu gave Samael the chance the Inquisitor had been waiting for, and he took it. Grunting with effort,
swing or to
the
run?
large Imperial man bent and arched, kicking the Jedi Master in the back of the head with a thick boot.
Oh!
The blow shook the bald man, leaving him open for Hecate's next attack. Still crouching against his forearm, pinned there by the force with which she had dropped,
Obi-Wan
the failed Avessor assassin pushed back, planning to flip away from Mace's guard and kick him across the face in the same instant. She very nearly accomplished it, but another hand blocked the kick for Windu, the second Jedi sliding in and grabbing her speeding shin, absorbing the force with no small amount of warp trickery.
Yeah.
Face bright with a challenger's grin, the blonde Jedi who had blocked her kick closed his fist around her leg, whipping around on his heel and throwing her with superhuman strength.
Okay, I was not expecting this to be a Obi-Wan flex. God damn, because you spent this entire episode building up Hecate, and then Obi-Wan just casually, well, not casually, it sounds like he's training, but still just manhandles her. Oh god.
Hecate spun in the air, absorbing that momentum as well, and landing on all fours like a predatory cat, smoothly rising and tossing two knives into the air, catching them with her free hand as she stalked
Showing off.
Her master had also taken the chance to kick off from the ground and roll away,
Reasserting the
avoiding
situation.
two sloppy down chops from the purple blade-wielding Jedi who he had been facing. The bald Jedi slid back after, shaking his head in pain and regrouping with the other Jedi Knight, blade before him, wounded arm positioned behind. In the same vein, Hecate slid over to her master's side, her movements elegant and controlled, especially compared to his own motions, his legs staggering as he coughed blood.
Elegant and controlled ever, sir. Fan, you're just giving all the descriptions I never expected, aren't you? Wow. I mean, dear God. Also, it sounds like Samael's getting his ass kicked. I mean, we already saw that beforehand, but he also knew he isn't playing to win. He's playing for her to get there. And for the situation chain enough that he can get away, probably.
He glanced in her direction, appraising her as he did. Within her was a churning heat, a frenzied need to move, to compete, and to win through death. Her skin was tingling, her heart rate had finally risen, and her anticipation was so high she could feel her mouth watering again. Death! She needed more death! The augments inside of her
There's the
ached
episode.
to be strained, and her blood felt molten with the amount of chemicals which had flooded her veins. Hecate, pass me a stim. He growled, looking forward once more.
sorry, it's just that little moment of, oh yeah, this is a way more controlled Eversor, because there's a joke in there somewhere about getting drugs from an Eversor. Ah, goddamn.
Sighing impatiently, she did so.
She still does
carefully
it.
but quickly reaching into her long jacket with her offhand and drawing out a needle and vial, already adjoined. She tossed the injector his way in the same moment. Samael caught it in his own offhand, using his thumb to flick off the
she's willing to
plastic
listen.
safety over the actual needle
without
and
actual controls
stabbing
being
it
used to
into
do
his
it.
leg without hesitation. A bloom of warm heat was suddenly expelled out into his body from the point of that contact.
Oh dear God, what the hell would Bacta do to an Eversor? Could it actually stabilize things so they don't need the drugs, but more just... Or would they stabilize it enough that they could survive even more doping? Oh God, I hope Fan didn't think of that.
The hot, itchy waves of sensation moving through his body and stealing pain from his myriad injuries. The Inquisitor breathed out a groan which gradually became elated, pulling the empty vial out of his leg and tossing it aside. Better. He grunted, his eyes and Hecate's locked onto those of the two Jedi across from them. Much better, he affirmed, wiping some of the blood from his chin. Do you have a preference, Lord Weiler? She asked.
She's still capable of speech. Sorry, I'm just... Every... Fan is describing probably the absolute most fascinating Eversor I've ever heard described, and it's amazing to me, and I love this. Ah. Although I will admit, hearing someone's like, Lord Weiler, it just sounds so weird because I'm used to assuming Weiler is not Samael, and that has that instinctive, oh God, why is that guy here? And I know it's not Tar, but goddamn.
Voice slick with vicious intentions. Samael nodded grimly and thumbed in the direction of the bald Jedi Master.
Oh?
You take blue, I'll take purple, he ordered, rising to his full height and wiping more blood from his lips.
Honestly, I don't think that's the right matchup. Just because she's over-the-top aggression, and that's literally the thing Obi-Wan's best at surviving. Granted, he has no way to know that, so it does make sense.
Yes, hissed Hecate, slinking off to the left, eyes now only on Obi-Wan. Hecate, cover me. 3-to-5 ratio.
3 to
Her
5?
master added, making her frown under her mask and sigh again. I cannot promise a kill if you make me a bodyguard, she whined. Killing.
I mean, to be fair, that's completely right. And again, the most sane Eversor I've ever seen.
Isn't the primary objective here, Heck. We're trying to get out of here. Use combat doctrine Warlock Prime on the Jedi. Understand? He ordered her more gruffly. She did not respond, instead twitching a little, red eyes boring holes into Obi-Wan's face. Understand, Hecate? He pressed. She nodded hastily. Yes, fine. 3-to-5, Warlock Prime. Can I try to kill him now?
I love this. I absolutely love this right now. Also, the fact that Fan is just showing that someone with all the power of an Eversor, or, well, less than all the power of an Eversor, yeah, technically weaker, but actually able to coherently hold a conversation and listen to orders only being told to them verbally. Normally, the entire control process for an Eversor is you put them through an insertion, sometimes a direct literal missile pod, because why not? Because it's big and visible and it is the approach. And they kill everything in the surrounding before they literally self-destruct. Or they're killed and self-destruct. It's technically weaker, according to Fan, but at the same time, this is a level of control that is absolutely fascinating to see.
She snapped back, her voice agitated, her skin continuing to twitch. The Jedi she was staring down smirked. My dear, I will be impressed if you can even keep up. Let's not get ahead of ourselves and claim a kill just yet,
God damn it,
said the
Obi-Wan.
Jedi, his blue eyes flashing in direct opposition to her red ones. Hecate smirked more widely, licking her lips under her mask. She was going to enjoy this one, she could already tell.
Here's the problem. I really want to do the next one. But also, I literally told my wife I'd be done by 1:30 to 2 o'clock. Yeah. Also, Eversex, or Eversnex, said Eversers don't self-destruct if they are not killed, at least from what I saw. They have deactivation voice commands. Some of them, yeah. I mean, they can be self-destructed if they're specifically told to. I don't think they intentionally waste resources because they're not easy to make. But they do blow down as basically to remove the ability to do it. And also if they're just sent into a suicide mission, which admittedly is a lot of the missions they're sent into. Because either they're there to kill or they're there to make a statement. And the statement ones they could probably be pulled back from. Thing is, though, I did 5 hours yesterday streaming, and I'm already a little late. I'll see how long... this part is 1 hour and 16 minutes. And it doesn't look like fans doing a big aftertalk at the end, so I can't do that. God damn it. I actually wanted to do this. If it was like a 20-minute one, I could justify it and maybe like say, okay, I can do an hour, but... sorry, guys. I can't justify doing a full episode after that last one. I would really like to, though, because that was so cool! God damn it, fan. Why do you have to make so many cool things that get long and I enjoy them? Granted, that means next week I'm going to be here for a while and to do it all. Because there's no worry about next week having any issues other than the scuff I had today, because we're going to ignore that. But right now, I do need to actually cut this one. Ugh. That said, this is just so freaking cool. This is probably one of the best intros for a character fans described. It's so good! And that intro of her playing with the balls in her mouth. The sugar jawbreakers. Fan, you know what you did. I tried biting my tongue not to laugh, but I just broke, man. Wow. Yeah. Next week, though, I am so looking forward to this. It's going to be amazing, and I'm just so glad I got to this section. This is so cool. If someone has actually animated this, though, if that is something in the works, or if there is someone who's in the process of doing it, let me know, because I really want to see that animated. That was the most intense scene of her dropping down, going full-on Ghost in the Shell intro side, and then just tearing apart and through everything. Yeah, so if you don't mind, I'm going to go and... Actually, we need to go get food for the cats. I should have forgot about that. Okay, yeah, we do need to run because it's not bad, but traffic's a bitch on a Sunday or a Saturday. Also, I need to find metal files for this because I'm cheating on 40K with Infinity. So yeah, need to go take care of that. For everyone watching, thanks. If you haven't already, there's a link to Fan's video down below. Hit it up. He did an amazing job. And get him up to the level of subscribers I'm at, because this guy needs more people looking at his shit, because this is good. Also, because he's just a really good writer, and it's completely justified. Like, literally, I know my own writing skill. This guy's better than me. Also, because I get annoyed at little things like having to edit, and then I never like to do it. So that's literally my own fault, but that's a different thing. But it's just so good to see someone so competent do such a cool fight scene, and it's just, gah! I'm geeking out, I realize. I'm sure no one got that. So if you haven't already, again, link below. Fans' videos down there. Go do that. And I'll go probably check this out next week. Oh, God, I'm so looking forward to that. It's going to be freaking awesome. Maybe I can start earlier to do more of it. Yeah, might be worth it. Oh, yeah. All the same, I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.